Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's edition of Community Builders. It is so lovely to be with you all. I'm coming to you from the beautiful Central West, a lovely little sheep farm here in the Central West. As you're joining, let me know where you're from today. Oh, it's a very early morning in Denmark with Kirsten. Great to see you. Chris from Truro in South Australia, where it's hot and windy. So everyone, as you jump on, let us know where you're joining from and what the weather is like there today. Now, you're joining us at Rural Aid here, Brizzy Jeanette. Who else is here? Stuart from Dresden, Ontario, Canada. Nina from Cootamundra, Sarah from Brisbane. Great to have you all on here. I'm going to shoot you a little link now to run a test on your systems. And that's just because we're on a system called Demio and it doesn't necessarily get along with every other web browser that's available, and it doesn't always do what it needs to do when we have terrible internet. So we just get you to run a bit of a test now, check the audio, check the visual, check your internet connectivity. And worst case scenario, if you have any struggles today, I'll send you the video about an hour after this session so you can catch up on everything that you might end up missing. Great to see you, Jenny. Good to see you, Melissa from Victoria, where it's 35 degrees today. How delightful. Samantha from Newman in WA. Great to see you. Belinda from Gunning. Oh, wonderful to have you all on board today. We've had a really good response to community builders, old and new, joining us for this edition of the series. We've got a little bit of a tradition we're starting here. We are wondering if you are someone who has been part of the Community Builders series before, jump down to the bottom of your screen in the chat section where the little emoji option is and send us a love heart if you've been part of the community here before. I'll go first. There we go. If you're new here, give us a thumbs up. We'd like to welcome all our newbies joining us here to the Community Builders webinar series. Great to see you, Sarah and Debbie. We're going to have a wonderful day today. As I said, my name is Lindsay Douglas. I'll be your host today, and we're so lucky to be able to bring you this series. This is our fourth series of the Community Builders. It started during COVID this time last year. We've run series with all sorts of different themes. I'll introduce you to this theme in a moment. But this series is brought to us by a wonderful new sponsor, and I'm going to take a few seconds to introduce you to them now. Pay our respects here at Rural Aid to ancestors and elders past, present and emerging. Now, don't worry if you do miss today. I know, Grant, you're having some challenges with being able to see the visual here and hear it all. We do have this all recorded, so we can send you a link, and we do eventually put them on the Rural Aid website as well. There's a Community Builders page that we're sending live at the moment. We will also send a bunch of resources during this session, which is great fun, so feel free to download anything that we shoot through to you. And yes, you are meant to have sound, Kirsten. I'm going to send you a link if you don't have sound, and I'll get you to check that in just a moment. And use the chat section. If you want to ask any questions, make a comment, share an anecdote, share your own experience. Hi, Di from Horsham. I think you might be one of our VIPs if we had a rewards program here. Great to see you back. And Heidi, I'll send you a link in a moment to sort out your connectivity challenges. We've also got a wonderful little group on Facebook. There's about 300 or 400 of us, I think now, where we all get together and share community building initiatives, challenges, questions, and the wonderful people from Bank of Ideas are on there as well. So they share a lot of their resources with us. So I've just popped a little link in there in the chat section to our Facebook group. Please join us. We'd love to see you in there. Now, this edition of the Community Builders, where we bring together people who get stuff done in small towns, who want to see small towns get stronger futures, we decided to focus on inspiring tales of reinvention. So this series, the theme is the reinvention of small towns through ... And each week we focus on a different reinvention tactic. We're going to be looking at murals and public art next week. We're going to be talking about ignoring the remote label and not getting strung up on that. We're going to talk about enterprising and entrepreneurship or entrepreneurialism in small communities. We're going to talk about country shows and the role they play. But today the focus is on Indigenous culture and heritage. And the town that we're heading to is probably a town you haven't been to. It's 3.5 hours east of Geraldton. Only 470 people live there, and it is the longest surviving gold mining settlement in Western Australia. Today we're going to be inspired by their tale of reconciliation and revival through art. Now, if you haven't joined us before, you won't necessarily know the treat that you're about to get, that is Peter Kenyon of Bank of Ideas. Each week, Peter Kenyon joins us with a whole host of inspirational stories, tactics, tips and strategies to look at your community building differently. And he usually joins us from a different pocket of the world. Peter Kenyon has helped over 2,000 rural communities, small towns all over the world, but a lot of them here in Australia, over 35 years on their reinvention and their community growth. So Peter, looking forward to your tales today.
Great. Thanks very much, Lindsay, and look, great to be with everyone. I'm at my home base. I live in a community called Kalamunda, which is local Noongar Bibbulmun country, and I pay my respects to them. Kalamunda means in the local dialect, place in the forest, home in the forest. And I'm based in the Darling Scarp, which the term for Darling Scarp in Noongar is Kuta Muda. And we're going to talk a bit about that a bit later. One of the exciting initiatives that's actually happening up here, because this is definitely Waggle country, and I'll give you that story. But I do want to acknowledge Indigenous people across the country. And as from this map shows, we are all of us, and my family have about a 120-year connection to this continent. I can have friends who can claim a 70,000-year connection. And our Indigenous people are the longest continuous culture anywhere in the world. And I think it's something all of us should be incredibly proud of. And it's made up of this amazing mosaic of kind of like tribes and nations that are actually across the globe. To me, I think we should be incredibly proud of the contribution that Indigenous people have made in those 70,000 years. You know, they were amongst the first astrologists in the world. They were traders. They kind of like were explorers. They contributed kind of like to weapons like no other group did. And they continued on. And I don't know how many of you have checked a $50 note lately, but, you know, there we've got David Unipon, who's one of our most famous inventors, but also very famous for his incredible advocacy for Aboriginal people and for his contribution. He also was the very first Indigenous publisher of a book, and he proudly is kind of like on one of our notes. Tourism is something that Indigenous people are starting to play an incredible role in. And I noticed this figure from the WA Tourism Commission that 80% of people who come to WA, and we're talking primarily pre-COVID, but we're looking forward to getting back to that, but 80% of them want an Aboriginal cultural experience. The sad reality is only 26% claim that they got it. There is immense interest in the contribution that Indigenous culture and heritage plays just in tourism. But to me, as we'll discover today, it has a much bigger role in terms of community building. One of the earliest things that I think any community can do is just to acknowledge its Indigenous people. And again, I just love the fact that increasingly signage is now being shown to kind of like do that. And again, it's a very simple thing that any town can do. It's an immediate first impression thing that we can actually do. I love the fact that where I am, as I mentioned in Kalamunda, we have got, we here celebrate the fact that the Darling Range, or what Kuta Muta is the local Noongar, this is Waggle country, and the range represents the Waggle that slithered into the Swan River and created our valleys and whatever. And we've got an amazing guy here, Walter Maguire, who has created his own tourism kind of like company. And in 2 weeks' time, we have our evening Friday markets here in our big park. And Walter is going to, with his team, come and put on the most amazing light show, kind of like illustrating that. And it's just an example of how simple you can do to kind of like take something like an evening markets and just make it so much more meaningful for both the local and for the visitors that will kind of like descend on our town for that kind of like evening market. Also within my community is this heritage complex. It was the first observatory complex in WA, and it's now no longer functions as an operating observatory. But a team of people have taken it over. This is in the community of Bickley and Pickering Valley, and they have started to kind of like turn that into an amazing kind of like tourist attraction. But what I loved was the fact that they discovered that, you know what, our local Noongar people here have been following the stars for up to kind of like 60,000 years. That's the way they determine their seasons. And for them, I love the fact that they've done this taken a disused kind of like observatory building and have turned it into the most amusing storytelling experience. And particularly the way that the emu in the sky, which is the Milky Way that all of us kind of like know in the European language, it is actually, to Noongar people, is the emu in the sky. And what this does is kind of like capture that particular story, particularly Mr. Farmer here, who's one of our kind of like well-known artists, has just been a major contributor to that and captured the story. And particularly on the right there, you can see this is the women's interpretation of that story has also been captured by a number of female kind of like artists. It's an amazing area. I love going into the most remote communities and where people have an ugly thing like this, like a tower or a water thing, and say, you know what, we can do something. And in this particular remote community, they also had another asset besides this ugly kind of like water tower, and that was young Indigenous men who had a passion for art. And I love the fact that what they were able simply to do, and way you brought together that water tower and those young people and their love of art and their kind of like contribution. And boy, today you got an amazing kind of like tourist attraction in the town. I love in the town of Esperance, one of the first places that wanted to kind of like have a permanent welcome to country built, and through their Esperance arts community and particularly the Indigenous arts community there have done this amazing permanent welcome to country. And again, the way that this town of Esperance down there on the Great Australian Bight has just been revitalised by an amazing collection of kind of like mural art, and particularly Indigenous artists contributing their insights and their kind of like heritage through all of that particular program. It's an amazing program. You just got to come to Esperance to see it. It's got one of the best art projects I've actually seen anywhere. And then obviously across the country, the silo art movement, and we'll be talking more about that next week. But again, I just love the fact in many of our communities, the recognition of kind of like Indigenous people and their art is kind of like now increasingly starting to adorn these kind of like assets that have sat there for up to 120 years that no one kind of like saw as this amazing gallery space that could actually be used. I love, one of my favourite places to work is a place called Belgo. You don't get more remote than Belgo. It's where they're on the Tatamine, halfway between Halls Creek and Alice Springs. But there is this community of Belgo, and boy, have they created the most amazing kind of like art centre there that just draws the visitor to this art and the quality of that art. The way they've developed an aerial tourism fly-in kind of like business, and where art dealers and art lovers across the globe fly into this remote community and kind of like experience. And particularly the quality of this art is just absolutely amazing. But that whole shire, it's all within what's called the Shire of Halls Creek, has just 5 of the most spectacular art centres. And again, the way that that has reinvigorated places like Warman or Turkey Creek, the town of Halls Creek, and many of the other remote communities there. And again, the way that that shire has kind of like invested in trying to develop that as part of their economic development strategy. And again, the contribution that that makes to people's income, the contribution it makes to tourism is just kind of like phenomenal. One of the things I love there, though, is that they're the ones that really promote what they call bonnet art. And boy, it's amazing. I love that particular on the right where people out of Belgo really wanted to capture which passion for their kind of like AFL team they were actually in. But that bonnet art has now become a major tourist kind of like element of the tourism in Halls Creek. And within the town of Halls Creek, a place much maligned by visitors in the past, but now people are stopping and photographing, getting out, spending money in local business. And a lot of that is driven by the amazing Indigenous art that's actually now being kind of like contributed to places like Halls Creek. And I see we have someone from Fitzroy Crossing, places like that. There's some just amazing yearly. There are just some amazing stuff happening in all of these communities. And then when it comes to the whole area of cultural dance, again, the contribution that that is starting to make. And there's a number of amazing tourist experiences that have been created. One that I love is what's called the Karijini experience, which is in the spectacular Karijini National Park. This is run by a local community centre in Tom Price called Nintiri. And Nintiri, for a number of years, have just used this amazing setting to kind of like display kind of like what people can do. And people come for this week-long festival to enjoy the most spectacular location, but above all to discover the incredible culture that is in that particular region. And again, it's become a major kind of like event on the regional tourism. Again, in terms of just using it and in terms of, again, just exposing people to our amazing Indigenous artists and to their messages and to their particular arts. The long table featuring kind of like Aboriginal tucker and whatever. Again, a great example what a small place like Tom Price using, again, the asset, the people asset and the physical asset to create an amazing kind of like tourism attraction. The same with Ord Valley Muster that happens. Again, an amazing experience that many, many people just need to kind of like experience. Before you die, you just got to enjoy both of these. And again, the centrality of what current Indigenous artists are playing in things like that muster, just to me, inspiring in terms of what people can do in small places like Kununurra up there in the Kimberleys. And then, you know, let's not ignore the fact that kind of like Indigenous people have made such amazing contributions to sport, to the arts, to industry in so many ways. And one of my favourites is Ernie Dingo. I'm sure he's a favourite of many. He's designated as an Australian living treasure. But he's a boy out of Mullewa. And to me, Mullewa is one of those towns that's really trying to reinvent itself as a small town. Well, you know, Ernie is a Mullewa boy. And again, you know, we need to be utilising those type of kind of like elements that we actually have within our particular towns. Shepparton, for example, these proud kind of like Audi mem, you know, you probably remember both of these people in terms of Douglas, who was really the first Aboriginal person who was ever knighted, and his contribution both as a sportsman but also someone who contributed greatly in terms of politics. He became a governor of a state. And William Proctor, who was just one of the great Aboriginal activists. But I love the fact that their story and their memory and their contribution is captured in this amazing piece of art in Shepparton in terms of it. The Johnny Moolah Centre is something we featured on a previous webinar program, all around one of the most famous cricketers. He was the cricketer of that very first tour that visited and played in the UK, an Aboriginal team, and Johnny Moolah was the best all-rounder. And in fact, this little town of Harrow, population 98 people, created the very first Indigenous Sports Museum. And again, an amazing difference that has actually made to people kind of like visiting this small particular community. And I want to tell you two experiences I had. One was being up there in a place called Kakadu that many of you know, but there's a place called Mudgeonbarney, home of the Mirror people. And this guy, Jonathan, saying to me one day, look, come and have a look at my country. He forgot to tell me it was a 12-kilometre walk and it almost killed me, but basically wanted to show me his country. And when we're sitting on this hillock, said to me, you know, what do you think of this place? And I just mouthed what you do when you're in Kakadu. It's stunning, it's beautiful, it's amazing. And then he shares with me that there were archaeologists there not long before we visited, and they're now claiming that this is possibly the oldest settlement site anywhere in the world, almost 70,000 years. 70,000 years. Isn't that amazing? And again, this community has that as as one of their great assets. And the other, I've recently been working with this place called Brewarrina in New South Wales. There they have this amazing bit of history. 40,000 years it goes back. These Aboriginal fish traps are now being claimed to be the oldest man-made structure anywhere in the world. This is well before the pyramids. And again, it's in this small town of Brewarrina out there in kind of like northwest, kind of like New South Wales. And again, that's what it looked like 100 years ago. But today, I need to say what it is kind of like hidden in all of this, overgrown, kind of like neglected by the authorities. But you know what drives me is the fact that community is saying this is an asset. And this is one of the great attractions we have. We can't afford to leave it in this particular state, and we want to do something. And again, we have these amazing kind of like contributions that our natural and our man-made kind of like contributions are made in the past. I love going down to Dunsborough and seeing what a community did there. And again, we featured that in a previous kind of like seminar where, again, a Progress Association working with their Indigenous residents said, let's create an amazing playground, an adventure playground, but also let's use it as an interpretation. And again, you need to visit and look at what a group of ordinary community builders in a small southwest kind of like town have actually done in terms of turning around what was really just a rubbish heap, to a bit of waste crown land, and turning it into something of value. It's the most amazing playground and adventure playground. Again, great to see people looking to their Indigenous heritage for kind of like ways that they could move forward in terms of local projects. And we also talked about this, the Lock Hospital Memorial Group, one of the shameful kind of like episodes in our history of where Aboriginal people being accused of venereal disease were rounded up across northern Australia and kind of like marched in chains to this place called Carnarvon and put on boats and taken out to two very remote islands. Of the 800 people taken there, over 200 died on the islands. But it's great to see kind of like descendants of those people saying this is a story that needs to be told. This is a story we can't afford to just keep ignoring. And working again with residents, Indigenous and non-Indigenous, they've actually pulled off this amazing project called the Lock Hospital. This particular kind of like figure that stares out where the daughter and the son are just not wanting to look where the parents are. An amazing sculpture. And more recently doing this Path of Pain. But again, a great way that this has actually happened. And that particular project has actually won last year 4 Heritage Awards in the West Australian Heritage Awards. But today we want to focus on one of my favourite towns. It's called the town of Mount Magnet. We've already had a bit of an introduction to it. This is a community of 470 people. This is the home of Buttermire people. And this is where over the last 2 years, the most amazing project has actually happened, where people have come together to say, let's acknowledge the incredible contribution and the process being to create this amazing reconciliation wall. And today we're going to hear the story behind it and the story that kind of like continues on in terms of what people have done. I want to acknowledge the fact that this is about the journey of local people, the Buttermire people, and it's them telling their stories from way back to kind of like where they want to go in the future. And I love the kind of like the statement, united we stand, be proud, stand tall, we work, we walk kind of like together. I need to acknowledge that this was the winner of the Tidy Town Sustainable Awards, and really it was amazing this year that through this program, this is the Tidy Towns program in Western Australia, run, and I know Shirley's online today. Shirley, you're doing an amazing job. And this was the one that won the Best Cultural and Heritage Award for Western Australia. And it's the one we want to feature today. So over to you, Lindsay. Show us the video and then introduce our special guests.
Bye.
I think it's a really great day for the people here in Mount Magnet and the Buddy My People, because you know, I've heard about reconciliation, but I haven't seen it in my 70 years, you know, and it's finally happening in my hometown.
People say, you know, we have had a broken relationship. Yes, that's true, but today is the symbol of the start of a brand new day for the future, where this wall, this garden, represents where we're going forward.
And a great pleasure to welcome onto the program our guests all the way from Mount Magnet. You can see their names on the screen now. Cecilia Kelly, who is a councillor at the Shire of Mount Magnet and a proud Badimaya woman, and Todd D'Souza, who is the local police sergeant and a member of the Western Australian Police Force. Welcome to you both. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm going to wait till Cecilia pops up on my screen. Hi, Cecilia. I'm going to start with you, if it's okay, and I'll jump off your screen and let you answer this question. Can you tell us a bit about this phenomenal art project?
Is that me or Todd? Me?
Yeah.
Yeah. Basically, it was a project that was driven by Todd. It was set up through our elders in the Western Australian Police. It also engaged other community members, especially our elders and our children, as you can see from the photos. It gave pride back to the community and the people, and it was the beginning of a relationship between the Badimaya elders and all elders and the Western Australian Police. So it was, it's made a huge difference in our town. It's given the voice back to the elders, and it's something there that's going to be there for the next 100 years plus, for generation after generation to see. And it's, the words say it all. It's about respect, trust, and unity coming together as one for the future.
I wonder whether you might take a little bit of time to share a bit of your personal involvement in remote communities and your involvement, and why as a police officer did you get involved in this community development and what's now become a major tourism kind of like project in the town? What's that got to do with
Well,
the
it's really
police?
important, Peter, that the police are involved in all community situations, and particularly where it becomes about when we're talking about reducing community harm, looking at ways to improve community well-being. We all play a part, all agencies play a part in that. And as a police officer, you know, I have a personal commitment to that. And so much so that when I joined the police force 20 years ago, my first posting was in Kalgoorlie, would you believe, and got to meet the Martu people and learnt a lot about their culture and future. And then later on, after getting promoted, I went through to the wheat belt and met some of the wheat belt people as well and learnt some more. Then moved on to the Pilbara, where I worked with a remote community in Warralong, and that's where I learned about the community trends that were going on, and where the elders needed assistance and support to stand up and play the role in the community and become leaders themselves as they were in traditionally history. And I also noticed that communities were a little bit, on the hyper side of fear and anxiety from not having that leadership. So to me, as a leader of a community officer in charge, I thought it was very important that I step up and show that police are better than what is portrayed. And number one thing is if I can rebuild and break the barriers and rebuild the community's relationship with police, then what a great opportunity this is.
Cecilia, I wonder whether you might just share a little bit about how this initiative has made a difference to your Badimai people and the wider community of Mount Magnet.
Well, like I said before, it's given the elders a voice and some leadership in the community. Not only has it beautified our town, it tells a story. It's like a timeline, and it's where we want to be, where we want our children to be in the future. It's just an amazing project that means a lot to our elders and our community, and also those handprints are our children's handprints, and they'll be there for another 100 years. Like I said, we'll have generations after generations telling that story, and hopefully by that time we'll all be united as one.
I wonder whether we might go back to you. You sent us a most interesting 3-page summary of your involvement and why in this project, and I asked you whether you'd be prepared to share that with all of our viewers, and you've agreed to that. So that'll be actually sent out to people. It's a wonderful 3-pager. But I noted within it, in May 2019, you say as the police officer in charge in Mount Magnet, you met with the elders and you asked them a key question. How can the Mount Magnet Police assist you and your people to feel valued? And how can we together reduce the harm and unrest in this community? Tell us more about that conversation and what followed.
Well, that to me was evident, to allow the elders to regain respect back within their own community, to gain respect of police and to work together. I needed to know where they stood. I needed to know how the elders were thinking and what were the handbrakes for them to move forward as a unit and instead of individuals, as some communities will notice and understand. For me, the follow-on part of that was the shock in their face when I asked them the question. And Cecilia can remember that day herself, I think, that they were blown away. They were almost speechless, weren't they, Cecilia, in relation to that? Because they've never been asked that simple process of, we want you to be involved and we need your input to make a difference. So, yeah, that was a really important day. That was probably one of the proudest days in my career, seeing a change in the people immediately, and the fact that one conversation we had, the trust they had in me. And I thank the Badimai people for doing that and trusting me through this process.
You could perhaps share, how has this impacted on the wider community of Mount Magnet? What difference has it made to the wider community?
Sorry, I missed half of that question, Peter, sorry.
Sorry, I just asked Cecilia, and then I appreciate your comments as well, Todd. What difference has it made to the wider community of Mount Magnet? This is a community that we all have said it's needed at times to come together in reconciliation. How has it impacted on the wider community, and what do you see as the benefits wider than just the impact it's having on local Paramai people?
I think it's had a huge impact on the community, especially our elders. Our elders group is stronger than ever now. When we have issues in the community, we call meetings and come together with the elders, and they try and resolve the issues without sort of like they've taken over the future of their children without different agencies involved and children being taken away. And I think I speak for most of Mount Magnet when I say they're very proud and honoured for the wall and the awards that was received through the project. So I think it's the words on the wall sort of say what's happening here at the moment. Like it's made a huge difference in the community. It's showing everybody that when we come together, we can come out with pretty magical results like this.
Yeah.
And Todd, can you just share how this initiative has made a difference, the reconciliation wall, because this is on the wall of your police station. I mean, you've given this very prominent position and it's right on the wall of your police station. How has this signified the WA Police commitment to reconciliation, and is this starting to happen elsewhere?
Yeah, so the purpose of putting it on the police station, it was an offering. The wall is 19 metres long, if people are not too sure how long it is. And it was just a blank wall with a boring little garden in the front. It actually had all full long grass. And so when we spoke to the elders, because before that we built the elders committee in the community. In the elders committee, we had a conversation, and I offered the wall to the elders as a general conversation, and they took it up. And I said this would be an opportunity to show that West Australian Police Force is committed to reconciling with our local Batamai people, and I'd be honoured if the elders would consider the offering. And before I even had to finish my conversation with them, that the people were putting their hands up and says, "Yeah, we want to be part of that. We want it to happen." So I gave the elders and the community the authority to put whatever they wished on the wall, because to me, it's the offering and it's their wall to represent what they wished.
Yep. And it's a pretty prominent site, and it's massive, it's big, and it's very attractive. Can I ask you this question? Was there any community pushback? Was there anyone in the community not happy that this was actually happening?
Yeah, there was a small group of community members who weren't happy. And look, taking aside whatever their views were, I understand. It's something new. It's something that's in your face. And if you're not prepared emotionally to look into why things are happening, I get it. The benefit that helped us as a group of elders alongside with myself and everyone else who was involved, because there was quite a lot of people and agencies involved. It was the majority of the community loved the idea and wanted to be part of it. And Cecilia can vouch for me on this as well, but there are so many people who put their hand up and never been artists before and put something on the wall, including myself.
It's great. And can I get you to comment on using local resources? I mean, one of my frustrations is every town wants the cavalry to turn up from Perth or Canberra or Sydney to solve their town. This was a community wanting to do things inside out. This was a community-driven project. And what I love particularly about it is that you look within for the resources to do it. You've obviously got an Aboriginal arts group in the town. And were there any other hidden secrets or assets that you discovered? Tell us about that.
Yeah, it was actually quite surprising. We actually had a young lady in the community who was working as a school and happened to be an artist, would you believe, Margarita. And she worked at the school helping people with working through emotional problems through art. So expressing themselves through art and working through that way, like a counselling sort of thing. And the elders recommended, as they wanted her to be part of it. So we had a conversation and she jumped on board and ran the project in relation to the artwork. And as you can see, all the kids there turning up and having a go themselves. So that's, we've got to thank the Mount Magnet District High School for that, for their contribution. And obviously Ramelians, who assisted us as well, and the Badamai Lands Aboriginal Corporation, who, helped us get the funding to buy the products. So we did this all, like you say, back to front. And it made a difference because we had buy-in from every direction we turned around. The elders sat down and put on parts on the wall as well. And it was just amazing. The artists just came from nowhere. We even had some of our non-Aboriginal members of the community, Indigenous members that came in and started building things in the garden for us and putting stuff on the wall. And it's just extraordinary.
Yep. And Cecilia, can you talk about local? I know there was a team of artists that surrounded Margarita from the local arts centre. And it was one of the first times they were invited to do public art.
Yep.
They had the little art centre, but for the first time they're out on the street. They're very visible. Tell us about that.
Yeah, it was the first time that they've actually taken art out of the art centre, and I think and I know that they were really proud and honoured to be a part of that project and to be able to tell their story on the reconciliation wall. Like, we had elders sitting there for hours, and sometimes it was 43-degree heat. So the passion was it all come from the heart, and it was quite amazing to see.
Great. And Todd, one of the questions that one of our viewers have kind of like asked was simply, what happens when someone like you moves on? I mean, obviously you are very personally committed to reconciliation and the role that the police presence in a town can actually play in a very positive. One of the problems is often people come into town and you're often there for the 2 or 3 year period and then you move on. Does that culture stay on? I mean, you want to just comment about that? How do we retain those initiatives when people with your drive and above all your commitment kind of like move on?
That's obviously played a major part in everything that we have done, everything that I do on my career. Is to look at sustainability. So we don't just design, okay, we're going to put a wall together. We're going to put other strategies in place. So in relation to me moving on, obviously I've moved on now. We built the elders in strength through the elders committee. So by forming the committee and having them take ownership of managing their own people, the Badamai people, and putting other things around that in place, including standing up and having a voice at the service meeting, which is the Yamaji group meeting, where all the services come to community, come to the town, actually sit. And we actually turn that process on its head by having the elders ask the questions to the services. This is the 3 issues that we are having in the community. How can you guys help us? So we've turned that process on the head. So by giving them the confidence to speak up, to be present, and to be proud of what they're doing, what myself and everyone else involved have created is a self-sustainable process. So if the next sergeant who goes into place, or the officers in place that aren't as committed as myself and the team that I had, then we know that the elders will continue the process in place. And the wall is a prime example of reminding everyone where we're going.
Yep. Cecilia, can I ask, you're a Shire councillor.
Yep.
What is the role of the council in this? And secondly, what impact has it made on local tourism and on regional tourism?
I think it's made a huge impact. I mean, one, like you said, I'm on the council, so everything that we discussed at these meetings, I was able to take it to council. The Shire supported our community feedback meetings that was taking place at the wall. I think through tourism, I mean, the people that come here, not only does the wall tell a story of reconciliation between the local police and the elders and the Buddy Maya community, it also gives them an idea of, you know, I mean, we can tell them where to go next, because we've got some pretty magical, significant places here for tourism. So after the wall, then then they get to see the other sites that we have here to offer.
Yep. And can you comment on, there's a very significant rock that's very central there in the conversation area you've created.
Yep.
It's obviously has a lot of significance. It's been, I believe, donated by one of the pastoralists. It's a very valuable kind of like item that's been part of it. You want to share a bit about that?
Yeah, that's the orbicular granite rock that's come from one of the stations that I actually spent 13 years on Bugatti Station. So yeah, I think where that rock comes from is also a significant meeting ground for the Indigenous Buddy Maya people. So it tells a few different stories, not only of the rock itself, but the place it comes from, which is pretty special to us.
Right. And Todd, I love a final scene in that whole mural where there's a pastoralist, his family, there's a miner, there's a police officer, and there is a Buddy Maya elder, and you're all looking at the rising sun. Can you share the significance of that particular part of the mural?
Yeah, Peter, how that came about was during the conversations we had during our elders meetings, was that, you know, they kept telling me what their dream was. Their dream was to be united as a community and to be part of the community, and for the whole community to understand. They get, as the Buddy Maya people, what their contribution was in the past, and they want to move forward as a group too. So they said to me, you know, we want to move forward and look for a new day in the future. So I went, what a perfect ending for the artwork. So we discussed it, and I asked the elders about who did they want on there, and they said a representative from each part of the community. So because it's a mining town, you'll see a miners on there. Because obviously it's on a police station and the police are involved in building the reconciliation with the Buddy Maya people, we're on there. You'll see that a farmer, because it's farming area as well, you see a farmer and his wife and children there as well. But if you actually have a look deeper into the photo, into the background, you'll actually see an Indigenous lady sitting on a rock with some kids playing at the side of the rock. So it's a bit more artistic than what people think, than what you can actually see. You've got to look into it. And so with the elder pointing towards the sun, it represents it's a new day. Let's move forward together.
One of the reasons I particularly wanted this story to be shown, not only because it happened to be a prize-winning entry and the most important cultural and heritage project in the Sustainability Awards, but it's played an amazing role in reconciliation and the change that's happened. And both of you have taken a lead role in that. You've helped to facilitate a path for the elders in the town to be seen, to be heard, and to take a lead in the community. What about the future, and what about the role of elders in the future? You want to share a bit about that as we finish?
You want to go first, Cecilia?
Yeah, I think the reconciliation wall has planted a seed. We've just completed a second project with all the community and Aboriginal artists involved, which is a huge tank up at our rec centre. It looks absolutely amazing. The reconciliation wall has also made our elders stronger. It's brought them all together, and just for the future of our children, for the future of everybody. I mean, they never had this opportunity before. It's the first time in my whole life in Mount Magnet that I've seen something like this happen for the better, and I just think it's amazing to see the relationships between everybody come together. And I think the more people working together, it's better outcomes for the future and our children.
Yep. And Todd, I'd love to hear your thoughts on that question. And while Todd's answering, I'll give you the final say, Cecilia. I just want, what advice have you got as a Shire councillor to other communities about using and mobilising and supporting Indigenous culture and heritage as part of their reinvention? I'll leave that as the final say. But Todd, your thoughts on the elders in the future?
Yeah, I think it's very important that we recognise as a whole community, including the agencies, that the elders have a massive part to play in moving forward. And when we talk elders, I need to remind everyone that there's not every town has got elders, but there's always senior family members. So on our committee, we only had 3 traditional elders, but we had 5 senior family members that actually live in the community or have lived in the community for a very, very long time. So to give them a voice was really important. So how it takes it forward for the future of their roles is they're now able, from what we've put in place as a group, that they can pass on these skills and mentoring that we've created within to pass on to the next generation to make sure it is sustainable. And to me, my job's done. And I've loved being part of the project. I talk to Cecilia all the time and ask how the elders are going. So to me personally, that's what I get out of it.
Okay. And finally, Cecilia, your advice as a councillor to other communities wanting to reinvent themselves?
I think this would be a perfect way to go. I mean, the photos, it just speaks for itself. It was an amazing way to bring everybody together, led by good leaders like Todd himself. And we're very blessed, I always said, to have Todd in our community, and he's left a legacy that I'd like to see in a lot of other towns. So we're very grateful for what he's done for Mount Magnet. And I speak on behalf of the whole Buddy My community, and I thank him for everything he's done.
My honour.
Well, I've got to tell you, Cecilia and Todd, the attendees here as part of the Community Builder series have absolutely loved today's session. There's some comments coming up like, thank you so much to you both for making it all sound like the natural, obvious thing to do. You've done a fantastic job and made an impact. Another comment is this is a wonderful project. Thank you to you both. Todd, you're an example of a great country cop. And Cecilia, we wish you all the very best. Thank you for sharing. And there's just comment after comment here. Now, to all our community builders watching, we've got a little tradition here. If you're a regular, you'll know what it is, but we use the emoji because we're not in a real conference room and we can't clap, but we clap with our emoji just to show our appreciation to Cecilia and Todd. I think you are going to inspire a lot of country towns here today. Thank you so much for sharing your story with us.
My pleasure.
Thank you for giving us the
Well,
opportunity.
I'm excited to tell you that we've got another wonderful little town coming up next week. The great phrase I heard out of Rural Aid this week was forget about Mona in Tasmania, which is, of course, the very contemporary museum there near Hobart. There's the town of Sheffield you should know about instead, and it's a town that has dedicated its walls and all of its surfaces to murals, and we look forward to bringing you that wonderful story next week with, of course, Peter Kenyon from Bank of Ideas. Mark Beatrops will be our guest. Now, if you enjoyed today and you're thinking there's someone else from our town that needs to be here, they're a primary producer or they're a community builder or they're on council or they've got a great idea that they're trying to get off the ground, please send them the same registration link that you used in order to join. I'll put it back in the Facebook group later on today too. Share it around. We would love to have more community builders on here because there are so many of you all over the world, and the best way we can connect is by jumping onto these sessions and sharing wonderful ideas. We'll share a copy of the presentation that'll be on Rural Aid Facebook shortly, as well as sending an email copy out to each of the databases. A little message from Rural Aid is if you are a primary producer or you know one, whilst we are delighted that for much of Australia we're seeing improved conditions, whether it's a bit more rain or a little less adversity when it comes to natural events like floods and bushfires, this is the perfect time for primary producers to register with Rural Aid because when and if times get tough again, we want you to have done the paperwork, registered with us. So should you ever require some fodder, some water, some counselling, some financial assistance, any sort of support, and boy does Rural Aid deliver a lot of different types of support, we would be delighted to be able to reach out to you if tough times occur again. You can support these superb businesses that are on your screen now because a proportion of every sale through these great companies and many, many more goes through to Rural Aid. And we've got a lot more of our corporate partners listed on our website as well. So on behalf of Peter, Kenyon and I, the team at Bank of Ideas, the team at Rural Aid and our wonderful sponsors, Holdmark, we look forward to seeing you all next week. There's a couple of questions here. Can we follow Mount Magnet on social media? Let me find out and get back to you in the Facebook group. Can we send the link from last week's webinar? Yes, I'll pop that in the Facebook group as well. We just take a little bit of time to edit it, to put it on YouTube and do a bit of a case study up for you. So I can get you an urgent copy, but the professional version will be out shortly. Peter Kenyon, he's popping back on my screen now. Hi, Peter.
Thank you, Lindsay. You do a brilliant job. And to everyone, look, tune in next week. Sheffield is an amazing story. It's inspired so many other communities, and it shows again what a dying town can do to suddenly reinvent itself totally through public art. And again, we'll be bringing stories from all over the country using public art and just trying to say there's no shortage of possibility. Go well.